The Toronto subway system's restricted speed zones have been all over the news for the last year or so. What's up with that? They're actually not new. It's just that they're better publicized than they used to be. If you've ever been standing on a subway platform and looked down between the tracks and seen little yellow lights, or maybe you've seen them when you're looking out the front window of a subway train, that was a restricted speed zone. And in outdoor sections, they use little yellow flags beside the tracks. It's really nothing new. It's been going on for years. There are even some on the streetcar network as well. So, why are they there?
The simplest answer to why they're there is to control speeds in areas where there's a problem with the infrastructure until the problem can be fixed. What kinds of problems? Here are a few. Rails may be made out of solid metal, but they do wear down with use. After all, a 6-car subway train is about 200 tons empty and more like 300 if it's full of passengers, and at peak times a train rumbles over the track every couple of minutes. It's inevitable that this will wear down the rails over time. Like all manufactured products, they can also have defects, which can cause cracks as a result of use. The fasteners used to hold the rails in place are also under a lot of stress, and they can fail too, allowing the rails to come loose. Because of the shapes of the railhead and the wheels, not all of the force is straight down. Trains also exert a lateral force on the rails even on straight track, and of course also in curves. If the rails are not firmly attached, the track can go out of gauge. Track gauge is how far apart the rails are, and the Toronto subway and streetcar systems use a unique gauge of 4 foot 10 and 7/8 inches. I talked about this gauge and its origins in my video on Toronto gauge. There's a magic link above, and I'll put a link in the description so you can find it when you've finished watching this video. But if you've looked at a map of these zones, or noticed places like around Rosedale or Davisville where your commute on the subway has been consistently slow for months and months, you might have spotted a pattern. They tend to be more prevalent in the outdoor sections. That's not a coincidence. In tunnels, the rails are generally mounted directly onto the concrete floor slab, which provides a nice, durable, stable base. Outdoors, they're usually mounted to ties, the bars that run side to side between the rails. Next comes ballast, the gravel you see around and under the ties, and below that is the ground. This whole thing is not as stable as a concrete slab, and sometimes things shift around from wear and tear, and rain can sometimes wash some of it out of place. Also, many of the ties are made of wood, which isn't the most robust material and tends to degrade over time with exposure to the elements. These factors can combine to cause greater instability than in the tunnels, and it can take more work to fix than something like replacing a worn section of rail. Often these problems are discovered by routine inspections or reports of problems, but the TTC also does periodic surveys where they use lasers mounted on a rail vehicle to measure just about everything about the track, things like gauge, railhead shape, and elevation, and whether there are any issues like cracks. Not quite as cool as sharks with laser beams attached to their heads, but still, lasers. Anytime there's a big, sudden increase in the number of restricted speed zones, that's probably right after one of these surveys. So, why not just fix them all as soon as they're discovered? Well, it's not actually that simple, and a major reason is time. There's only about a 4-hour gap between the end of service at night and the start of service the next morning, but a lot of things have to happen in that time. The trains need to get to their depots, the work trains have to get to the job sites, and the workers have to do any necessary setup and preparation work. And then the reverse has to happen before start of service the next morning. Ultimately, there's only something like an hour and a half left to do the actual work, and of course you can't just leave it partly done. The repair has to be completed before service can begin. This is a major reason why the TTC does early nighttime closures and full weekend closures. Closing just a couple of hours early can more than double the amount of time available for work, and a single weekend closure allows for about as much work as a month of regular overnight work periods. Also, some jobs just take too long. If a job is going to take several hours, it's impossible to do that overnight. The streetcar network also has restricted speed zones. After all, those are nearly 50-ton vehicles, plus passengers, with metal wheels rolling over metal rails, and so similar sorts of problems occur. But in addition to a few specific places, there are also some standing orders that streetcar operators are supposed to obey, causing them to stop or at least slow down for certain things throughout the system, and a lot of these have been in place for years. Here are a few examples. Before driving over a switch, the operator has to stop and confirm visually that it's pointing the right way. That one is at least in part due to problems with the automatic switch controls that were installed for the previous generation of streetcars, the CLRV and the longer ALRV. For things like switches or diamonds where two sets of tracks cross, operators are required to drive slowly until the whole vehicle has cleared the area. And streetcars aren't supposed to pass each other in those sorts of areas, so that if one streetcar derails, it won't end up hitting another, a rule that was put in place after just such a thing happened.
Some of this has to do with TTC leadership. About a decade ago, when Andy Byford was in charge, he made state of good repair a priority. That hasn't been the case with all of the leaders. And of course, a lot of it comes down to money. Maintaining a state of good repair is expensive, and by slowing the vehicles down in troublesome areas, you can stretch the budget by putting off some of that work until later. That's probably especially the case in the streetcar restricted speed zones, where they have standing orders. After all, you could spend a bunch of money fixing up the tracks and the switches so that the vehicles can move safely at normal speed, or you could just slow them down. Well, I hope I've given you something to think about the next time you're stuck in one of these vehicles moving slowly through a restricted speed zone, or when a politician comes to knock on your door and ask what they could do to get your vote. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Please like and subscribe.